All right, as you can probably tell, this video is going to be about Chapter 9, Circles. Now, Homework 9 has a few other things in it that are review, like the graphs of the other shapes. But the only thing I want to talk about here are the graphing circles and what we haven't already previewed on this topic. So I have this problem here from homework 0. That's a little hard to see here. It was, well, I guess problem 43 from homework 0. You don't really need to see that. But, and if you wanted to see this problem, you could just see it on homework 0. In other words, it's a problem you should have done a long time ago, but I'll just read it here. Find the center, h comma k, and radius of the circle, graph the circle, and they give you this equation of the circle, which I wrote in large print here. In green, x minus 1 squared plus y minus 1 squared equals 16. The formula that I wrote in red is just one of those formulas you need to know. It's the formula for a circle. When I say a formula you need to know, there are a few of those, like the quadratic formula and whatever else. But the formula for a circle, x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals r squared. And so you do some matching, and you match, and x minus 1 squared matches up with x minus h squared, so h is 1. Similarly, k is 1. And let's see, r squared matches up to 16. So if r squared is 16, yeah, r is 4. And that's all we need to graph this. So if I come over here, the ordered pair 1, 1 would be the center, and you obviously would graph this with a computer, but that'd be the center, and then the radius, or the r, is 4, so I'm going to go 4 in every direction. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 dots this way, 1, 2, 3, 4. That would be enough, 1, 2, 3, to graph this on the computer, but since I'm graphing it by hand, I need to go in each direction. But on the computer, when you do this, you just click and on 2 points, the center and the circle. But it's not something you haven't done for me before, and that's kind of the point. We've previewed this, and so a question like this shouldn't pose much of a surprise or a lot of work. All right. Well, I did have a few different questions, like this one, for example, on Chapter 9. In other words, this was on Homework 9. It wasn't on Homework 0. So what are they asking here? Find the center, HK, and the radius of the circle, graph the circle. So it's pretty similar to what we've already done. Notice that when I write it by hand here, it says x squared. It doesn't say x minus anything or x plus anything. There's no parentheses. It just says x squared. In other words, there's no parentheses x squared minus h or something. But I just like to say the parentheses are invisible, and so is the h. We'll get to that. And again, just copying copying the question. Y squared minus 3 squared, or y minus 3 squared equals 16. All right, let's start on this side. If 16 lines up with r squared, r is 4 again. If y minus 3 matches up with y minus k, well, k is 3. And if you just have x squared, you're not subtracting anything from the x. So you can think of it as it being 0. Or you could even think of it literally as x minus 0 squared. In other words, x squared equals x minus 0 squared. Yeah, zeros and ones are sometimes invisible, and we have to find them. So we had to find the 0. All right, so what does this mean? It means the center is 0, 3, and the radius is 4. And by the way, just to make sure you can enter this properly on the computer, you have to type in r is 4, and you want to type in, like it says, as an ordered pair, the center. And so have that here. That's the ordered pair 0, 3. If you go 4 in each direction, you get that image. So far, I really haven't told you anything that I couldn't have asked you back in homework 0. So there's got to be something new to chapter 9. There always is something new to every homework. And here's kind of a big question on what's new. So what's new in chapter 9 are questions like this. These are questions that don't have the parentheses already handed to you. You have to work to get, let me go back to that thing I wrote twice now. All right, this thing I wrote in red. X minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals r squared. That's our goal. Our goal is to make something that doesn't look like this look like that. We got to put it in that form. All right, so here's the question with some fairly big numbers: 3, 3, 30, 48, 255. Hopefully you notice that each of these numbers can be divided by the same thing, 3. You know, we're actually kind of an expert at that kind of thing by now. You know, if we were to factor this, I could look and say, oh, you know what, I could factor all of these. By the way, this is 3 times 85, 3 times 16, 3 times 10, and 3. Okay, so all of those can be divided by 3. And I'm saying divided by 3. I just said factoring, but I don't really have to think about factoring. I can just divide. If you think about it, I don't know, probably divided by 3, I don't know, much earlier in your life than you factored out of 3. So I didn't factor. I wanted to keep this as simple as possible. I divided. I could have. In other words, this problem would be fine if I had parentheses around here and a 3. But the goal wasn't to factor this. It was just to simplify it the best I can. And since it's an equation, we know that we can divide both sides by whatever we like. I'm going to divide both sides by 3. 0 divided by 3, 0. Everything divides by 3. So let's do it. All right. And now, remember our goal was to rearrange the terms so I get something. I'm kind of looking at I'm not looking at this step right now. I'm looking at this step. My goal is to rearrange the terms so that I get x minus h, y minus k squared equals r squared. Remember, my goal was to somehow get this thing that we did way back in homework 0. All right. So what I'm doing here is rearranging the terms, and that's it. X squared minus 10x. I put those next to each other. The x's next to each other. The y squared and the 16y, I put those next to each other. And I even brought the plus 85 to the other side of the equal sign, so it's minus 85. All right, and now we have to be pretty good at spotting a formula that we saw, well, all semester, and that is this idea of a perfect square. Remember, when you have a perfect square, there's a certain pattern to it. When you square something, let me write that in a space I have here. Let's say I said x plus, and let's just say 7 squared. We know that's going to be x squared plus 14x plus 49. How do we know that? Well, there are patterns to this. It's if you have a plus b squared, it's a squared plus 2ab plus b squared. You know, this is part of the binomial theorem and, you know, Pascal's triangle. It's just one of the earlier ones, and you've seen it in, you know, many different forms. All right, so here's the, I guess, trick. We're given in this type of problem that I'm doing here just these first two terms. So in other words, you're used to having a 7 and saying, oh, this is 2 times the 7, and this is 7 squared. In other words, you have the 2b if you have b is 7 and b squared is 49. All right, but what's happening here is you don't know. Didn't mean to erase as much as I erased there. All right, you don't know a few things. You don't know the 7 yet, and you don't even have the 49. All you have is the 14x. I erased that accidentally. All right. All you have is the 14x. You have to figure out that, you know, if that's a 14, this must have been a 7. Because if it were a 7, I'd double it, I'd get 14. So basically I just did something called cutting in half. And now that I know that's a 7, this is going to be 7 squared, and that's where the 49 comes from. So the idea on this is I should be able to pick up anywhere. In other words, if I know it's a 7, I know the other numbers. If I knew the 49 but didn't know the 7 and the 14, I could figure those out. It's just connecting everything. All right, so let's see this. And when you see it done, I think you'll at least agree with the numbers that I got out of this. So I have a 10 here. Half of 10 is 5. Now, that's not supposed to be a trick question. Half of 10 is 5. And what I want here is 5 squared. So in other words, I want a 25 here. There'll be a time to write down the 5 in a second, but I want to cut it in half and then square it. So 5 squared. I'm staring at a 16. Cut in half, I'll get 8 and square it. 8 squared is 64. Now let's make sure I'm doing this right. If I add 25, I have to do it again. If I add 64, I have to do it again. And just so you know, this is quite a change. I really did a lot to the previous step. Not only did I rearrange the terms, but I added a 25 to both sides. I added a 64 to both sides. But of course, I'm doing this for a reason. All right. And I said that the reason is pretty obvious once you get to this step, right? Once you get to the goal. Now that I have the 10 and the 25, you know, the x squared, I know that this is x minus 5 squared. So basically what I'm doing is I know it's an x, I know it's a minus, and I know it's 5 for 2 reasons. This is 2 times whatever goes here. So that's 2 times 5, and that's 5 squared. All right, let's do it again on this one. With this one right here, I'm looking at y squared plus 16y plus 64. I know that's going to be y plus 8 squared. Again, your brain does it this direction quite frequently. X plus 8 squared is y squared plus 16y plus 64. You just have to kind of reverse that. And then if you work it out, 85 plus, or negative 85 plus 25 plus 64 is 4. So what I have done is this, I call this a bingo moment right here. I just took a problem that is in homework 9 and reshaped it into a problem from homework 0. So this is the exact type of problem that you have been doing literally all semester. So what do I have? H is equal to 5. remember it's h minus x minus h, so h is equal to 5, and k is equal to negative 8. And r is equal to, r squared is equal to 4, r is equal to 2. So I've got my numbers. I have the problem here that I was just doing. This is the problem as it appears on the homework. Exact same problem I've been talking about. R is 2. We know that h was 5, k was negative 8. By the way, this I will want to talk a little bit about this. This was the one of those questions that I had mentioned way at the beginning of the class. One of the things I said was, there's one type of question I don't like. And it's when somebody focuses on something and says, why is it 2? And then they look here, and they look here, and they look here, and they look here, and they look here. And they say, why 2? Why is R 2? And they're looking in the wrong place. Why is it 2? Well, my question for you would be, what did you get for R squared? All right, don't just focus on the final answer. Focus on the process. All right, I'll explain why it's 2. R is 2 because when I put it in the format where R squared goes in the final step after the equal sign, I got 4. In other words, that's a more reasonable question. You know, when you complete the square, when you write this in its form, x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals r squared, you know, why was r squared 4? Well, that's where you should be looking. All right, so just make sure you're, I don't know, investigating the question and the depth of the question that you're looking for. All right, y 5, y negative 8. Again, when you transform this equation, you get this equation, and that's where the 5, the 8, and the 2 all come from. All right. Well, the good news is once you have that, you already know how to do the rest of the problem. You find the center, and you draw the formula based on that, the circle based on that center and radius combination. All right, that's really all that's new. It's certainly some work, but we've previewed this extensively. You really just have to get used to doing a couple of things. One is putting the parentheses in. We've done that in several chapters. We sometimes call it factoring, but in this case, it's not just factoring. It's a very specific formula we're trying to get. But put the parentheses in so you get that format, and you can graph the figure. The rest of homework 8 has to do with other graphs like parabola and the exponential graphs we learned in chapter 8, the logarithm graphs we learned in chapter 8. But at the end of the day, there are only a certain number of graphs, total of 4, that you are responsible for in this class. One shape is the circle, which I was just talking about, line, parabola, and the exponential shape, right? Circle and line. All right, so 4 shapes, and chapter 9 kind of formalizes the circle as the shape that we need to know. All right, so that's our really early video for chapter 9, or homework 9. The rest of it, stick with the homework and take it from there. See you in the next video.